Before we get too much into it here, I'll go ahead and just say welcome to Make Your Own Fun. I'm here with Trista Robinson. She is an actress and co-host of the Without Your Head podcast. And I didn't realize that that podcast has been around for a long time.
Yeah, I am not, I've only joined within the past 2 years, but it is the Neil Jones and his brother Troy Jones. They're my co-hosts on the podcast, and they've been doing it for quite a long time indeed. It's actually the longest running active horror podcast, which is
really it's a 15 or 16 years, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. I don't know off the top of my head, but yeah, they've developed a really impressive community. So I am very happy to be on board.
So how did you get involved with that? Were you just approached or you found out about it?
So I actually was doing a film. I met Neil on a film set, and but I had already previously been a guest on his show, but it was audio only at that point. It only started being a Zoom interview after COVID, really, or during COVID rather. So before that, I had spoken to him when I was promoting a different film, and then I met him on this film set, and then he invited me to be his co-host.
Very cool. I personally feel that Zoom and video and YouTube is the way to go, because then you always have the option to do audio only, because you can just take the audio from the video feed, but this way you have like both.
Right, I agree. In fact, we do the same thing because we're on a lot of platforms and some are only audio. But for me, I think you kind of miss a lot, right? If it's only audio. Audio is convenient for me because I'm not always able to be in front of a screen. I'm pretty active, so I like to listen to podcasts. However, I do think humans communicate in a lot of ways that aren't really verbal.
Yeah, and I also think too that it's just more like when I'm like talking to somebody like this over Zoom, like you were saying, it's just I pick up body language, like eyes, and then sometimes people will laugh or react and maybe not make a sound. Like sometimes people just go like, and they're just laughing, but they're just, I don't know, sometimes it's just a natural reaction to cover your mouth or, look away or something like that. And if you were listening, you go like, oh, that joke didn't land at all. Like, what is wrong with this person,
Yeah, I totally agree.
So I know that you are way into horror movies and that genre. So do you remember when you were younger, kind of like what movie or a book or something like that kind of got you first interested when you were younger?
Yeah, Child's Play, the original Child's Play, Tom Holland's Child's Play is I'm just a Chucky girl, so I was real scared though when I was a kid, but now I just have such a fondness for it, the film, and yeah, so I guess that was it. It was really terrifying for me as a child, but now I can watch it and sort of laugh and just have a cozy feeling.
Right. Now you got the nostalgia, but like when you were a kid, it's just you're so not used to something from the outside world of like your immediate house and your immediate like group of friends coming in and having some kind of effect on your life. It's kind of like I was telling and she was making fun of me. Julie, in the other interview that I did the other day, that I remember when I watched like Nightmare on Elm Street, I was freaked out because I just kept thinking like, you mean I can't sleep ever? And when you're like 10 or 12 or whatever I was just like, but I need to sleep. I get tired. What do I do?
Aw.
I think I probably had nightmares too from like some of the first few like horror movies, like, Jaws, stuff like that. Anybody running around with a chainsaw or a meat hook I was always like, so if you have sex or you flirt or you make out, you're just automatically gonna die? Just automatically gonna die? Like that doesn't seem fair. Like, do you remember watching those movies like Friday the 13th or things like that, where like as soon as somebody started making out, you would turn to your friend like, well, they're dead. Like, oh, they're gone. As soon as people start kissing, you're like, oh yeah, they're gone.
Yeah, I watched a lot of horror with my dad. So I think I wasn't as scared because I was with him, but I think if you're sneaking off with your friends, probably it might be a little more scary.
Yeah, anything I remember when I was like 12, 13, 14, and I was like, why is there always a guy with a rusty meat hook? Like, who just has a rusty meat hook? Like, why are there so many rusty meat hooks? Like, do people just know somebody that has like access to a hardware store or like a boat or a shipyard, and they're just like, well, rusty meat hook, it's time for me to kill some teenagers. Damn teenagers. So do you remember kind of what got you first interested in like acting when you were younger?
Yeah, I do. My aunt, my dad's sister, um, was an actress. So I really admired her. And she started sort of training me, and I started doing theater with her.
Oh, very cool. Do you remember when or how you kind of decided that you wanted to get involved with horror stuff when you got older?
So it's sort of fateful for me personally because I was a horror fan as a kid. I loved horror. And then I studied theater and acting, and I went to a conservatory in New York, and they didn't really take horror seriously. We studied the classics, so they didn't have a great appreciation for um, horror films, horror cinema. So I was very embarrassed about my love of horror for a long time, just because I didn't go to the training I received wasn't really focused on that, and none of my peers were into horror. But it was such a big part of my childhood. So I sort of kept that close. And then when I started auditioning, I started booking horror films. And then I was actually really excited because in LA, there's lots of people who love horror films, and there's a huge community. And so then I started meeting all of these people, and I didn't have to harbor this deep, dark secret. And then I just, that sort of perpetuated for me.
Yeah. And if you think about it, like if you look back over like the last 20 or 30 years, I would say everything goes in phases and stages. If you remember, even as far back as the 90s, there were still a lot of cheesy superhero movies getting made. And then in the last like 15 years with the Marvel movies, it's like, big business and people are dying to get into Marvel movies. And, just look how far that's come from people just running around in spandex and doing things like this with their fists, and in the old Batman, like pow, zing, boom, bam. And now look at how far that's come. But because of that and like the whole fantasy world too, like Lord of the Rings, it's really just opened up everything. So now it's kind of raised as an art form. Like if you think about Robert Edgers and his recent movies, like The Witch and The Lighthouse and The Northman. Like I don't know if you've seen The Northman. that's a brutal movie. Even though it's like a Viking film, it's just like, but the thing is, like, we are more accepting, I think, as a general audience of like movies with creepy settings and creepy atmosphere, and we don't question so much that those like, well, why is this fog bank moving in for no reason? We're just like, oh, that sets the tone, you know. And I think there's this thing probably ever since like the first Scream movie. I remember people want to get together like in a movie theater as a group, as a community of like 200 300 people in a room, and react to what's happening on the screen. Because it's one thing to watch a horror show or a movie in your living room with one or two friends, and you've got your popcorn, and some popcorn ends up on the floor when you're but like being in the theater, it's kind of like, almost I would compare it to like kind of like a church, where it's just people have their own like individual beliefs or whatever, but when people come together, like suddenly there's like this group thing. So I'm sure you've noticed that too, like when you've gone to a theater or like a film festival or something, and there's like 200 or 300 people in a room, and everybody is so focused on the screen, like you just remember it. It's a better experience than rather than just like streaming something at home and you're just like,
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm glad people can safely go to theaters now.
oh yeah, I mean, what a difference. I mean, just even a couple months ago, I remember going to a theater and there was like four other people, and I was like, this sucks. And then over the last, couple months, things have opened up and things are safer and everything. Um, so tell me a little bit about that over the last like few years, like when like the lockdown was happening and everything. Were you just more focused like on the podcast because that's something you could do from home?
Right, exactly. I certainly was. So, I did right before uh the lockdown, I did complete a film that of course I can't talk about, but that will finally be available soon. So I'm very excited about that. And then it was sort of fateful that I did meet Neil around that time and then get started on the podcast because um, it's also the great thing about the podcast is I love having my friends on, talented people that I feel are sort of underexposed, and getting to give them a platform and share their awesome work, because I know so many talented people. So it was a great way for me to connect with them and promote them in the time that we weren't able to work as much. And then there were of course, films that were in various stages for me of production. That's some uh, didn't get completed, some got pushed and eventually got completed, some we're still trying to figure out. It all depends kind of on locations and cast and traveling and that, and where your money's coming from. So yeah, so I did the podcast a lot, which was great. And there were some times when I was able to shoot too. I do have uh, a project I'm really proud of that I don't think is gonna be released, but I'm glad I got the experience of working and making those connections with people, because work begets work, and I also just like meeting great people. And then yeah, I have a couple other things. I'm being very vague, but it was a large chunk of time, a couple years. So there's so many projects with varying degrees of difficulties due to the pandemic. So some will be released, some won't. Sometimes I was actually able to work very safely, of course, and at times I wasn't, and just did the podcast.
So let me ask you this, to piggyback on that. Were there other things you were able to focus on and do as a creative outlet? Not just acting, but like, anything else you might be interested in, like, I don't know, writing or playing an instrument or painting? Because so many people, I think, during that time, when you're faced with just yourself and you're stuck, I mean, you can order everything you want on Amazon Prime, but sooner or later, it's like you have to fill up your day.
Yeah. I do toy around with writing. I was certainly, I would say, a writer before I was an actor, but that it my writing I'm not as confident in, and not as proficient, certainly, and not as professional. So that's more for me for now. I do have some ideas for some productions, but for now I think I'm a little bit of a chicken. So I did write, but
Well, you
nothing
shouldn't
that
be
I
a chicken. I mean, there's absolutely nothing to be afraid of because you have so many friends in the industry that are in your support group that are gonna say like, "Hey, this is really good. Like, if you are putting something out into the world, like, we're gonna support you." And like, everybody starts somewhere. Like, you have to have that baseline, and then you can improve from there. If you don't put anything out, how are you going to know how to improve or where to go or who to talk to, who to show it to?
No, I know that you're right. In fact, I give this advice to other people all the time. I say, you know, well, writing is rewriting, right? Like if you never get through the parts that suck, you're never going to get to the good stuff. Like you just have to do it. I'm very good at giving that advice to other people. I'm just not great at taking it. But yeah, I do write a bit. I have some ideas for maybe some short films. But yeah, so yeah.
Very cool.
I'm not as confident with that as it just seems a bit more personal than I don't know why.
Well, I mean, there's different kinds of writing. For me, example, I'll just say that, when it's something that's like I'm chasing down a feeling and it's something that I need to just, get out, and I'm frantically trying to find like a napkin or a piece of paper, or like if my phone's within reaching distance to get it down. Like for poetry, that's really personal, and it's just, I'm experiencing something or I witness something and it kind of makes me think and I write it down. But there's also like short stories, there's songs, there's screenplays. I mean, I'm a big fan of just write whatever and let somebody else tell you what it is later. Like once you finish it or once you show it to somebody and you're like, I don't know, this is like a short story or this should be like a short film. Like, I don't know, and then somebody will say like, oh, well, maybe if this character is developed more, or you start and then you end with a character that's just like bookends, because sometimes you need that person that's kind of like what I call on the outside of a hurricane, kind of like looking in and going like, oh, well, maybe you didn't think about this. But the thing I'm trying to tell you is like, if you don't take that chance and put it out there and share it with somebody, you're never going to know.
Yeah, I know
I'm
that
not
you're
trying to be like a motivational
no,
speaker.
I appreciate it. I know that you're right. I do know that. That's something I struggle with for sure.
No worries. So, do you remember? I don't know if I don't. Are you originally from LA?
I'm from New York originally.
So, what brought you, or how long ago did you come to LA?
I came to LA for several reasons, really, but I did a play in Portland, so I was living in Portland for a while, and then I uh just moved down to LA. At the time in New York, I was getting a lot of like there's just a lot of musical theater stuff, and that wasn't really for me. My heart has always really been in horror, so I did this play in Portland, and also I just prefer the sunny California weather very much. So then I came down to LA, and then I just started working in horror, so I've been very happy here.
Have you had any experiences, when you first came, where it's like working on short films or student films, or like I was, so you saw the interview with Julie where we talked about shady stuff, where when you're new to town and you don't know anybody and you're just desperate and you're looking at one ads or Craigslist or whatever you can find to kind of get your foot in the door and actually meet some crew, there had to be something where you were like, oh, maybe this was not such a good idea.
Yeah, that's a great question. That sort of It sort of goes back to what you were saying about like getting through the learning curve with writing. Like for acting, I was definitely paying my dues. Right now, I'm being a little more selective about what I take on, but it took me a while to get to that point. And I'm fortunate enough that through that trial and error, I was able to meet people that I love, similar to what Julie was saying. You find your people and you work with those people over and over and you kind of grow together. So that's definitely something I'm grateful for. That's how I work. But the flip side of that, as you were saying, like I've definitely had experiences where I felt like I am in the wrong room. These are not my people. This is not my project. And there's a time when you just want to work on everything, right? Because you're learning and it doesn't matter. And then you get to a point, I think, for me anyway, where I need to be a little more discerning. I want to be proud of the projects that I work on, and I want to feel good about the people that I'm with. And that's become a real priority for me.
Has there been anything on a set that you can think of where it wasn't so much in the script or agreed upon beforehand, where the director or somebody on the crew suddenly said like, so yeah, anyway, today, Trista, we're gonna change it up a little bit and you're gonna be doing this, this, and this, and it's not something you agreed to or knew about, and suddenly you were like, yeah, I can't do that. There's no way.
Yeah. And you know what? In my instance, um, what's funny is I don't actually, in my instance, it was sort of a dangerous stunt that these people are actually great friends of mine who I'll continue to work with. But I think just the sheer exhaustion of the shoot didn't have them really thinking straight. They're not bad people, they're wonderful people actually, but they were just going by this shot list. And I was tied to a chair. And they were like, now we're gonna they got all these shots and they were like, now we're gonna lift you up and drop you on your head on the
What?
Yes. And I was like, I'm tied to this chair. And I was like, no, you can't do that. They're like, no, no. And they're showing me the shot list. And they're like, no, it's the only shot we need. We have to lift you up now and drop you on your head on the cement. And I was like, I'm like pleading with the PA, like, no, no. And nobody wants to speak up because they don't want to be a jerk. So they're just quietly trying to do their job. And I'm like trying to break out of this chair, like, no, you're not. Please don't.
Like, I need my head. It's not
Yeah.
an egg. If it cracks, I'm fucked.
I know, and it took them a long time for some reason. I really think it was just the sheer exhaustion of the shoot because they're wonderful, kind, intelligent people. And then when they realized, they were mortified. Then they were, but for some reason it took them a long time, and it's never really. I have an easier time standing up for others. I'm very fierce when I have to protect someone else, but I'm getting better, but it can be challenging to speak up for yourself. And so, of course, I sort of feel like I'm being the jerk because I'm the minority because everyone seems to think this is suitable. But so yeah, I had to really fight. But then they didn't do it, and the movie turned out great, and we're all working together now, and it's fine.
That's awesome. I was talking to an actress friend of mine a couple weeks ago, and she was telling me a story about um, she was working on a horror movie a few years ago, and they were like shooting at some like dilapidated barn, like out in the desert, like miles and miles from anywhere. And they were like, yeah, okay, so at this point, the killer's gonna come in, and you're not going to see him, you're hiding, and then you think that like you have a chance, and so you're going to like start to get away, and you're going to kind of creep along this back wall of the barn, and it was just only going to be lit by the outside, light or whatever. And then he's going to like shoot you with the nail gun. And she was like, oh, like he's going to come up and then add it in post or whatever, or the sound and the Foley. And they were like, no, he's going to shoot you. It's going to be great. And she was like, shoot me like, oh, like you're going to film from behind me and like you'll edit it in and I'll just react like, no, he's really going to shoot you. It's going to be great. And then finally, like another actor that like had already done his scene came in, and he like, because the girl was just like, and then finally he said, hey, you know what worked really well on another movie I did with a nail gun? And the guy like was totally bullshitting the director, but he was like, what we did is we had the girl like stand up next to the wall, and then we just kind of like lifted her shirt like shoulders and like the side of it, and then we put the nails in, and then we just reversed the footage. And they were like, oh yeah. And he was like, yeah. And the girl was like, let's do that. And that's what they ended up doing. But it, like you said, I think it's just long days, low budget. They'd only have, the location for a limited time. They're not really thinking. Everybody's exhausted, and they're like, we're just gonna shoot you with the nail gun. And the girl was like, what? Like, and she kept thinking like, oh, he must mean, like I said, behind the back shot or reaction shot. And she was like, no, they were gonna fucking shoot like my shoulder with it. And then they were just, but then she said she talked to them a couple of years later. They were like, oh man, we are so sorry. Like we were just exhausted, and we were just so excited to set up the special effects makeup and everything. And we didn't phrase it right, and we didn't mean to freak you out. And she's like, yeah, literally, I think I peed a little. It was, what the fuck were you guys talking about? And he was like, it never happened again. And she's like, even though she kind of gets along with them, she's like, I don't think I'm going to work with them again. It was just one of those things where it was like, even though you're super excited and you want to get to the special effects makeup stuff, it's like, you can't just spring that on people, and you can't shoot people for real.
Yeah, safety is a big concern of mine on set, because it's so easy to get hurt, and you really have to advocate for yourself. Nobody will really advocate for you, only because like you said, everything's so expensive, people are so busy and overwhelmed. And I really try to advocate for myself and for others. That's important.
So let me ask you this. So what has been, because you have such a long film credit list on IMDb. Do you remember like what one of your favorite death scenes was in any film that you've made so far? Or that you thought was like super cool and creative?
Yeah, I do. Should I describe the death scene or say the film title, because I don't want to spoil it?
Just talk about the scene, because then
just talk about
the
the
movie
scene
later. Yeah, that way you're not,
okay.
People won't know.
I'm always so paranoid because you're never
if it's like a 15-year-old movie, I mean, if they haven't seen it.
Oh yeah. No, it's not a 15-year-old movie. It's just a couple years old. But I do have a death scene where I'm sort of it sounds weird when I explain it, but I'm sort of thrown into this basement, and there's a creature who's a cannibal, but I'm trying to like seduce him so that he doesn't kill me, but then of course he kills me, and I wind up decapitated. So I like that.
All right, fair enough. I was like, when you first started describing it, I was like, where is this going? I thought it was going to be like some kind of demon love scene or something, and you were like, didn't see that coming. So, well, this is kind of a fun kind of speculation kind of thing I've done with some people, which is, what's something that you always thought would be like a really cool death scene in a horror movie that you haven't seen yet? That you always thought, like, why hasn't anybody tried this?
Oh, that's interesting. Huh. Well, I don't know if this is answering your question, but often when I'm doing something menial, like taking out the trash or walking the dog or something, I'll this is very embarrassing. So I'll imagine, like, what if someone comes to attack me right now? How would I murder them or defend myself? And so I'm often imagining like interesting ways to hurt people. And a lot of times I have like hot coffee with me, and I'm always thinking like, oh, I could like I throw hot coffee in their face and their eyes, and then that's how I don't know, death by hot coffee, is that an answer?
Hey, as long as you get it in the orifice, like an eye, nose, mouth, ear, skin.
Yeah.
If it's scalding, if it's not like, cold coffee.
Right. And then I'm always looking around like this. I feel like this is making me sound very neurotic, but I'm like, oh, I could throw hot coffee at them. And then like, oh, there's a rake there. And then I could like jab their eyes. Like, so something like
That's really
that.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so funny because, we're working on this vampire movie, and I am so mad that, because I wrote the script, months and months ago, but it's like now I think about different death ideas. Like I always
You know,
thought,
I'm in that, right? I'm in
yeah, I
that.
know.
Yeah, I was so excited to realize that. I didn't know when I agreed to be on the podcast that you had written it. It's so exciting. Sorry, go on.
No
I
worries.
interrupted you. I'm so impressed
Yeah,
by
that's
you.
fine. Yeah, we're both. You're acting in Body Count, and I wrote the Holly Hatchet segment. So
Yeah, that's the segment I'm in. So
I
I'm
know you,
thrilled.
Jen and Richard. It's going to be awesome.
I know. And Julie,
And Julie's working on it
well,
too.
I'm very sorry I interrupted you with my
No worries.
so please go on.
But yeah, I was like, now that I've written it, it's about to be filmed or whatever. I always thought, with the bigger budget or something, it'd be really cool and funny in a vampire movie if people are getting chased, and then that old stereotype of a white picket fence, and the vampires are coming and they're like, 30, 40 yards behind them, and then they turn down a street, and then the people are running, and then they see like a white picket fence, and then they all look at each other and they're like, no way. And they go over and they kick the fence, and then they just start using the white picket
I
fence
love that idea.
as
That's a great
stakes.
idea.
And then they're just like, how many of these do we have left? I don't know, probably like 20. Well, that's good, because it's a white picket fence. So I'm like, it's like something out of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but it's pretty cool. And another thing I thought was, if these vampires were captured and they were going to be tortured, a really cool way to torture vampires would be if it was like out in the ocean, and it was a buoy, the things that float in the water,
Yeah.
and then there's blood in the water, and so sharks are circling. So and then the sun starts coming up, so it's like they have a choice. It's like they can either try to make a swim to the shore and fight the sharks or outswim the sharks, or they're just going to get burned up by the sun. So I kind of like that, where it's like a dilemma where like they didn't kill the vampires, they didn't torture them, they just put a little bit of blood in the water around the buoy and kind of tied it, but easily enough that they can break the ropes and be like, well, what do we do if we wait too long, the sun's going to kill us, but if we don't get ahead of the sharks are going to kill us. So
That one makes me have empathy for them.
maybe that's a movie where the vampires are the good guys.
Yeah, I like that idea.
It's just something that was one of those things that popped in my head the other day, and I was like, okay, I haven't seen that in a movie. I'm putting it on a podcast that's going on YouTube for free, so somebody will probably take that, and they're just like, thanks, buddy.
I almost see that as like a beautiful painting, even. I was really imagining it while you were describing it. It's great.
So yeah, well, if anybody who's a painter that's watching, there you go. So we've got a few minutes left here, and I just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of time to maybe plug some upcoming films or festival appearances, that you have coming up.
Thank you. I do have things coming up that I'm not allowed to talk about. So it's, I guess, the worst time to do a podcast, but I'm happy to talk to you regardless. So I will mention very vaguely, I have a movie with a project that I did with Michael Epstein and Sophia Cassiola, who are great friends and amazing filmmakers. So I'm excited about that. And then I also have, so my friends, Brian Avenay Bradley and Laurence Avenay Bradley, we are working on another movie together. We're shooting that currently. And I can't say much about it, but our last movie is called Echoes of Fear. So I can plug that, and I'm very proud of that. And then and we have another one coming out soon. I also have a movie called Hell's Coming for You, which will be hitting festivals too. I play bounty hunter in that. And
Cool.
yeah, thanks. And the director is Mark Savage, who I've worked with before on a film called Purgatory Road. I also recommend that. What else am I doing? I have a short film with my friend who I think is such an underrated horror filmmaker, Justin Bernard Head. And I can't talk about that either, but we have a film called Queen of the Dead on YouTube that anyone can watch, and I'm very proud of that collaboration. So I can't talk about upcoming projects, but I can talk about the collaborations with the same directors that I worked on previously.
No worries. So where can people find your work? I know that they can see you on YouTube Without a Head, but do you have a website other than IMDb?
No, but I do post updates on my work on Facebook and Twitter, and it's just Trista Robinson, so very easy to find.
Cool. And I'll go ahead and once again for Holly Hatchet and Body Count, we'll talk about the GoFundMe, which is still ongoing, and I know Jen's still raising money to kind of finish up everything. They need some extra cash for, cast, crew, locations. People like to eat when they make movies. And every single kind of like prop and everything you can imagine under the sun. So that's still ongoing. I know that the production on that got pushed back. I think we're hoping for September, might be a little bit later, but more on that later. But I just wanted to say thank you so much for being on the show, Trista. You are amazing and awesome, as I knew you would be.
Well, that's very kind. The feeling is mutual, and I'm so impressed by you and so excited to be working with you and happy to meet you.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you so much and best of luck. And I'm sure I'll see you on set in a couple of weeks.
Thank you. I can't wait.
Awesome. Have a great weekend.
You too. Bye.
Bye.